So now that we didn't get a lot of response, but we understand that out of the participants here, at least out of the responses, we got almost 100% of you are involved in handling financial models and forecasting, and you also, most of you are also involved in regularly updating the files. Now, when we are talking about files, what do people typically do? This is a probably it's become a meme material now in terms of the versions. Mostly what we end up doing is we end up creating multiple versions for our own files, right? And sometimes there's just too many versions, we don't even know which is the final version. What is the problem when we have too many versions? The problem when we have too many versions is, first and foremost, we cannot compare our actuals to forecast that easily, because you forecasted a file, let's say a week ago, and today you got the actual results. You have to open two files to check what was your forecast and what is the actuals and what is the difference, because actuals is going to be in some other place. Just briefly speaking, what do companies do when it comes to handling multiple versions? What do they do about handling this issue? How do I know that the file that I'm using is correct file? Because one thing is saving a version, but one more problem that happens is how secure is your saved version itself? Because sometimes it has, I know a lot of people with whom this happens. You open an old file, and so once you open an old file, what ends up happening is you don't realize it's the old file. You think it's a current file. You make some changes. Then you realize it's an old file, but you've already saved the changes. You've closed it. So now the old version that you have is no more the old version because it's corrupted with some new modifications, right? When we have these kind of problems, what do companies do as of now? One is they do nothing. Some companies just live with the problem. A lot of companies as on date probably are living with the problem. If you're in the equity research or brokerage firms can't afford to live with the problem, because tomorrow regulator may pull you up. They may say, okay, you gave a buy rating. What was your model? How did you come up with the forecast? On what basis you came up with the buy rating? So you need to have the model secured. What typically companies do, brokerage firms that I have seen, the large brokerage firms, what they do is two things. One is whatever is your model output, that gets stored in a secure database, and files go through a workflow approval process where the file gets stored in a secured place again, where you can't just like that go and change it. It'll be just stored and nobody can modify it. At the most, as an analyst, you can download it. That works for them from a regulatory standpoint, but what are the limitations there? One limitation is, think of this, when I'm trying to take all the output and store it in a server. If I'm a brokerage firm, I'm going to be having analysts covering hundreds or thousands of stocks. I will have to standardize my database. So what may end up happening is I may have just one line called cost of materials. And then we have airlines for which there is no cost of materials. All it has is fuel cost. Now fuel cost and maybe their food and beverage cost, something is getting mixed up and it's getting added as cost of materials. Because you have to force fit your line items to fit with the standardized line item in the database, right? If you are from equity research background, I'm sure all of you would be able to relate to it. So if you pull up the data from the data server and want to compare what happened, you just can't. And obviously assumptions are also not stored. One more issue with all the files being securely stored is, yes, the files are protected, but they are not available for some analytics engine to pull and do some comparison. Okay, I want to compare old version versus current version. They're generally not available. Maybe some companies have now made it possible, but they are generally not available. So what is our solution here? We would like to try to see as much as possible to avoid multiple versions, right? I'm first giving you this context. The reason I'm giving you this context is so that when we go into solving the problem, we know why we are even doing it, right? But firstly, let's talk about what creates multiple versions for us. If you're in broking firm and let's say you are covering 20 stocks, each stock is going to have a separate file, right? In FP&A, maybe you have two different branch office or two different product lines. Each product line may have a separate files. Each file will have multiple line items. Sometimes these line items change, right? Companies will probably classify new line items. Maybe last year I only had 4 segments, business segments. This year I have 5 business segments. So when you had one new business segments, probably you have to create one more version. For each line item, we are going to have models. What I mean by models is, here when I say model, I'm talking about formulas. So maybe 1 year you modeled your salary as number of employees into average salary per employee. Later on, you realize that that's not really making sense. It's better to keep it simple and go with revenue into some assumptions, some percentage. Each time you change a formula, that has to be a separate version, or at least that's how it's being done right now. And probably I'll come to the lowest level of the entities here that leads to changes, the assumptions, or what we call as the parametric estimates. So earlier I took the salary as 10% of revenue. Now I'm changing it to 9.75%. We end up creating a new version. And the parameter changes the lowest level of change. And as of now, even that requires us to create a new version. So what we're going to do is we're going to see how do we control this? How do we reduce the version, not use the version? And later on, we'll also see, if using different version is the only choice. In that case, what else we can do? I'll just give you an overview of it. Now, let's move into the techniques that we're going to be covering today. First, we'll start with how models are handled. This most of you would know. When an actuals come, typically what we have is we have the past data getting overwritten, and we will be copy pasting the models, and you will be revising the assumptions, right? But the problem is now we have overwritten the past data. So what was our forecast earlier? We don't know. 2024, I now have actuals. What was the forecast? It's not available. The technique I'm going to be talking to here involves us retaining the old assumptions. So we will be retaining multiple set of assumptions. But here is the thing, retaining multiple set of assumptions is not new for a lot of us. Many of us as an analyst, if you have ever done scenario analysis, you would have done this where you have a base case and best case, worst case assumptions kept in a place, and you then change the scenario number. With the scenario number changed, the model picks up the appropriate assumption for the new scenario and works out all the calculations. A lot of us would have done this, and this is not a very innovative practice talk in today's term. But what we're going to be talking about is, what if I have multiple cases and it also keeps changing? How do we handle it? If we set it up in the same traditional architecture, you're going to have base case, that assumption today, and base case assumption 1 week ago, base case assumption 10 days ago, and alternate assumption. If we keep doing it that way, it's going to be a long list. And that's where we need a more intelligent architecture. How are we going to do it? Let me first illustrate this to you with how I would do it. Let's say if I'm using Office 2019 and prior version, right? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change how I hold my assumption. My assumptions and actuals are going to be held as a table. Now, table-based architecture is what the best framework, which we came up with around a couple of months ago, talks about as the best architecture to hold your data. It may sound a lot of counterintuitive for us in the initial days, but once you see its power, you would know, why that makes a lot of sense. But let's first see what we have and what kind of data comes into picture. Let's say this model was last updated on 15 December 24, where I had actuals only for 22 and 23. And these were my assumptions that I updated that time. Now, what is going to happen is I'm going to get new 2024. Let's for a moment assume we are working with calendar year. My 2024 full year results are coming to me on 25th December 2025. When this comes, we are not going to overwrite the existing data. I'm going to add this data to my existing table. So I have here revenue, gross profit, and OPEX. I have all these things added. And once I add, maybe my analysis changes, my assumptions are also changing. So what I'll do is I'll add the assumptions to my assumption table. So the information is going to be here. So we are not overwriting any of the existing data. We are capturing them with a time-stamped record. But as an analyst, this is not what we want. We want to be able to see the answer side by side, right? I want to see the full picture in one go. How am I going to do it? Here is what I'm going to do first. I'm keeping a little bit of a helper section here, where what I'm trying to do is just use some data which we may use. So I'm going to look at, in my summary, historical data needs to come from the actuals table. Forecast needs to be computed using the assumptions. So let's first figure out, what is the last reported historical year. So I could use a max function to pull it. But here is the thing. The max will tell me it is 2024. But if I want to view the result, let's say as on 31st January 25, how did my financials look like? Because 31st January 25, we did not have 2024 number published. So I would want to see, how did it look on 31st Jan 25? So I'm going to make one difference here. I'm going to use maxifs. Maxifs the year column where the update date is less than or equal to the date that we are checking here. So I have a cell here in cell C5 or C4, which tells me I want to view my model the way it looked as on 31st Jan 25. So I'm going to say, as on 31st Jan 25, what was the last reported year? That is 2023. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I need to figure out, because if I'm going to pull the revenue, whether I'm going to pull it from this table or I'm going to model it using assumptions, I need to check one thing that, is this from my past historical data or is it something I'm forecasting? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a formula here saying that, checking that whether current year is less than or equal to my last reported year. Let me add a less than or equal to. So 22 and 23 are from last reported year. It's coming from there. And whereas 24 to 27 is assumptions. This is as on 31st Jan 25. I want to now, if you look at very interestingly, in this case, the actuals have also got restated. So my 2023 has two different actuals, right? Actuals, which was originally published in 23 annual report, and the restated actuals. So if I'm going to pull 2023 data using, let's say, an XLOOKUP or something, or VLOOKUP, lookup, anything, I need to know which date is the relevant date, because I cannot pull 377 as my revenue for 2023 if the model state is as of 31st January 25, because as of 31st January 25, I did not have the restated number. So I'm going to check here one more thing. When was the model last updated? What I'm going to do is this. If it's a historical data, then I will have to check for the update date from the historical table. So I'm going to check this. If C7 is true, then what I want is I want to check what is the last reported update date. What are my conditions? My condition is the year column should be current year, but that's not enough because we also want to ignore future updates. So I'm going to put one more criteria, that the update date is less than or equal to this last update date I'm looking at. One more thing, this is if it's true. If it is actuals, then this is what you're going to do. You pick up the update date from this. What if it's not a historical date, it's forecast? So if it's forecast, I will have to get the same max latest updated data, but from the assumption table. So if you look at our actuals and assumptions, I did not mention this, that we have a timestamp. The timestamp exists here, which is what is helping us a lot here, right? So I'm going to say, pull out the latest date when I updated it. Pull out get me the update date where the year is the year of the current column and the update date is less than or equal to C4. C4 is the state data. I mean, what state of my model I'm looking at. Let me close this. So we now know that all the data are last updated as of 15 January 24. If our update date was changed to, let's say, February 25, then 2022 number, we didn't change it after December 24, but subsequent data, we changed it, right? That's what we have here. So now I need Excel to pull out the relevant data from the relevant table. How are we going to do it? First, let me pull out the assumptions, right? What I'm going to do is for revenue growth rate, for now, I will leave out the historical assumptions. I mean, for historical, capture the assumption. So I'll just do one thing. If this is part of historical data, then don't do anything, right? I don't want anything, or just get me a NA. If it's not part of historical, I want to pull out the revenue growth rate assumption from the revenue growth rate table here, provided it is for the current year and updated as on date. So I'm going to look up for two things: the year for which the assumption pertains to and the date in which it was updated. How do you look up for two criterias? One thing you could do is you could create a combo key. So I'm going to create a combo key because a lookup function or a VLOOKUP can look for one value. We want to look for the year as well as update date. So I'm going to create a combo key where I'm going to say, look for the combo key is going to comprise of the year. I'm just putting a delimiter, which is an underscore, and update date. I'll add the same combo key here as well. The year and the underscore and last update date. So this is going to tell me that, this is creating a combo key where it captures both the year as well as the date of change. So let me go back and edit the if function. So we're going to say if the C7 is true, then that means it's historical data. There is no assumption to pull. Otherwise, what I want is lookup function existed even in Office 19. It's existed in Office 2003 or in Office 95. So look for this combo key in the combo key column and pull out the revenue growth rate. Let's close the bracket here. So same way, I'll pull out the gross margin. Instead of revenue growth rate, I'm going to say, now let me get the gross margin out. And for OPEX as a percentage of sales, I'm going to say, let's get the OPEX out. So now we will have the assumption. So 2024 as of 28th February is my update date right now. So 24 actuals is available. So no assumptions are flowing in. But if I change my update date to, let's say, January 25, we are going to have the assumptions flowing in here, right? The assumptions are being pulled from our assumptions table. Now let's go to the revenue section as well. So what I'm going to do is this. For revenue also, we have to pull out the actuals. Even actuals, we have to pull out from the latest updated number. So we'll have same combo key applied in our actuals table as well. So equals year followed by the update date. I have the combo key. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to mention that if this data is, I'm using old technique, right? Office 2019, where we are not using a lot of dynamic arrays or anything. So this is just to show that this is something that we could have done long time ago. This is not something new capabilities of Excel. So I'm going to check, if this is true, then I need to pull revenue from the historical data. So for this combo key, pull the look at the combo key column and get the revenue. What if it's not true? If it's not true, take the previous year data, multiply it with 1 plus growth rate. So for 2023, this is true. And since this is true, we are getting data from the actuals. For 24, if my state date, I mean the date as on which I want to see the model, if that's 2023, then we see that it's now using the assumptions. We can repeat the process for every single line item. In the interest of time, because I think it's, we are already at 11:30. So in the interest of time, I will move to the next section. But what I would do is I'll wait for a couple of minutes just to see if any questions have come in LinkedIn comments or in WebEx. Desik and Aditya, if you could just help me with what kind of questions have come, that'll be great. And in the meanwhile, let me just
Sir
put some of the other
Narayan,
formulas.
Sir Narayanan actually asked one question, but he kind of deleted it. He asked it that why can't we use zero instead of using NA there?
We could have, some of those things are a judgmental call because if it's zero, somebody may get misled, thinking that, why would my revenue growth be zero? I mean, did we take 0%? NA kind of indicates that it's not applicable for that period, right? It's that's the reason we have done that.
But
Okay. All right. Let me just quickly do this for gross profit as well and then I'll move to the latest approach. If I'm using dynamic arrays, how I would do it. And we'll also talk about how do you bring in workflow controls and how do we handle formula change and everything. In fact, so if I'm going to be doing this with the gross profit, I'll just copy this formula as it is. So if it's actuals, in that case, we are going to be pulling out the gross profit from our gross profit table, from the actuals table. Otherwise, I'm going to take the revenue number and multiply it with revenue gross margin. This is how I'm going to get the gross profit. And we can very clearly see here, as we change the date, we will be able to see what happened to us, right? Any other questions that's come so far?
So Jacob is asking, there are models that has been existing, let's say, for more than 10 years, and we have got 20 plus seats in sell side analyst models. How feasible it is to incorporate these changes to that if we are planning now?
It is not very difficult. We can do this, but the only thing is obviously whatever analyst forecast we have lost in the past, that's lost, right? We can do a one-time exercise where you've got all the, let's say you've saved all the work with you for last 20 years or 10 years, you've kind of saved it properly. We can do a one-time version where using Power Query or Power BI, we can pull all those files and get all the assumptions that was used in the past. And in fact, we would, one of the things that we would be talking about in our next webinar is about how do we, sometimes it's not possible. It's just not feasible to have a single version because our models are not matured enough. In that case, if you have multiple files, how do we securely store it and pull it in Power Query and view it? That's something we'll do in the next webinar, but that's something that we can do. But it will involve a one-time effort in handling these tasks, right?
Yeah, so Chinmay is asking, are dollar size relevant with dynamic arrays?
Or dollar size relevant? I would say, dollar size relevance has not completely vanished in dynamic array. I don't use it because I work with range names, which I'll also show you later on. I work with range names, and in that case, we don't use any dollar signs. And there is no copy pasting that happens otherwise. But I would not say it's completely gone. I'll show you a small illustration where somebody may still use a dollar, right? May have to use a dollar sign.
Okay. Sir,
Okay.
Ayush is also asking, why do we rely on using combo keys and VLOOKUP instead of something more dynamic like SUMIFs? If we want to add additional columns in the assumptions
We could
grid
have
or
used SUMIFs here. One small issue with SUMIFs, why I'm trying to avoid is that a practical issue that could happen, and we will be talking about even how to address this as well when you go to Power Query, is that when people are handling data like this, right? I used a XLOOKUP to get this 14%. Now I could have also used a SUMIFs here to say, SUMIFs my revenue growth rate, where the year is current year and the last update date is this year. So where I'm not using the combo key at all. This is going to get me that 14%. Oh, sorry, we have to change the date. It's still not 5%. Okay. Okay, I'll just check it. One thing is you can use SUMIFs function here instead of using combo keys. But problem with SUMIFs function is that if someone that, just say for the sake of while updating, let's say by mistake, somebody took the data like this. I by mistake created duplicate value because I'm updating a long form table. Duplications are not something that uncommon. So if you end up using duplications, then what ends up happening is SUMIFs will end up counting it twice, whereas XLOOKUP will pick it up only once. So that's a bit of a judgmental call. And in fact, we will talk in the next step how we can avoid all these issues by moving out of Excel for getting the inputs. All those issues in Excel, getting input duplication comes when you're using Excel for the input. But if we move, we will also talk about it, how we can completely move out of Excel when it comes to accepting the inputs, right?
So, hello.
Yeah, there's you can
Yeah,
go ahead. Any other
sir,
questions?
yeah, on LinkedIn there are a few comments. One of the comment on Shalini Sharma is asking whether you could show MaxIf formula again.
max ifs function. Sure. In fact, what we'll do is, we will be sharing this file with all the participants through a link. So what I would suggest is you could go through it, the max ifs function at that time. That would be very useful. By the way, just one small issue is in this case, I use lookup a little, being a little lazy. VLOOKUP would have been a good task. We were getting a wrong answer here. The reason being lookup expects the data to be in alphabetical order. So we should have used a VLOOKUP. XLOOKUP works fine. I was just wondering why we were getting 14% as revenue growth when our update data set is 28th February. So when you're doing approximate match, we need to be slightly careful. When you're using table-based architecture, we need to be careful about using lookup function. You could go with the VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP. Lookup, use it carefully, right? Especially when you have repetitions. Maxifs, as I said, I'll share the file. You can go through it, to understand it, because we are also a little short of time, significantly short of time, actually. Desigan, any other questions in LinkedIn?
No, sir. Just other question was that whether the recording will be available.
Yes. Recording will be available. LinkedIn Live will automatically have. We will also share our WebEx recording separately, right?
So before you proceed, one last question. Indu Sekhar is asking, I hope I am pronouncing his name properly. The session, the session is so much enlightening right now, but they are asking that, is it the best way, what's the best way to store the assumptions and actual table? Is it good to store them in separate sheet?
I will talk about that shortly. In fact, when we go to SharePoint, we will discuss that. In the meanwhile, before I move on, just one small demo, just to save some time later on. Now that we've got all this information, one important question is, what can I do with this? One of the things I can do is, let's say, for example, I want to know how my gross profit for different periods evolved over a period of time. Let me keep these as, let me just put this here. So I have my timeline plotted here. Sorry, just one second. So one of the things I can do is, having designed this, how do we check how the forecast has evolved? Because one is you can change the date and see what happened to our forecast. That's something we can do. But is there something else that I can do? By combining this data table, I can also do one more thing. So I'll have my gross profit for, let me capture it from 24 onwards, right? So what is my gross profit for 24, 25, 26, 27? I'm having my gross profit numbers here, right? And what I'll do is, I'm going to use data table. I'll go to data, what if analysis, data table, column input cell. This input is in the first column, and I'm going to say the column input cell should be in C4, right? These values should go into C4. Click OK. So by combining our architecture with Excel's built-in tool like data table, we are able to very clearly see how the forecasts have evolved over a period of time, right? That is one of the things that, that's how we combine this architecture. Why this architecture is going to help us add more value is we can combine with data table and see, what was my forecast for gross profit for, let's say, these years, right? For these years, what were my forecasts, values and formats? We can clearly see how our forecast has changed, right? Now coming in terms of the question on, how to keep the assumption, is it best to keep it in a separate sheet? Yes, it's always an ideal thing to keep it in a separate sheet, but later on, as we show, if you want really good controls, the input should not even be in your Excel file. Your input is to go outside your Excel file. I'll talk about it very briefly. But before that, one more thing. This can be done in MS Excel, even the old version. That's what I showed you here. With VLOOKUP or index and match combo keys, you can do it. But one of the problem with the old version is, if you look at this particular case, this company is introducing assumptions afresh for 2028. The analyst is introducing a assumption for 28 afresh on 26th May 2025. If you're using older versions, one problem is, even if I look for the data latest date, let's say 31st October, 20 data does not flow here unless I manually choose to copy and paste this. Right? I have to manually extend this. Then I can see the 28 data. But as such, 28 data was not coming here, even though the assumption for 28 got inserted here. This is where dynamic array helps us. What I have done in dynamic array, the answers are already here, right? I will just very quickly tell you what we have done differently with dynamic arrays compared to the old version. And here I'm also introducing one more thing, because what if I also have a best case scenario and base case scenario, right? Because we only change the dates, but I have different scenarios for different period. In that case, what I can do here with dynamic array, what I'm going to do is most part remains the same, just a few changes. One is when you're using dynamic array, and if you choose to use combo keys or anything, I recommend not to use it as a calculated column, because while we had calculated column, one problem is calculated columns are not fail proof. Somebody can manually come and alter formulas in the calculated columns, which can take our model go for a toss. So if you're using dynamic array, one of the things that we have done here is, firstly, what I've done is, I've also added the facility to add a base case scenario here. So you could choose your scenarios to be, do you want a base case scenario? Do you want a best case scenario? You choose a scenario, you choose the date. This again could have been done in the old versions. Nothing stopped us from doing it. Now what I have done here is, I'm using a separate enriched input table of sort, where if we want best case, I'm using a filter function. In fact, before going into filter function, for combo keys, let me show you what I've done. The actuals, I have pulled the actuals into whatever is there in the table, I've pulled it into a dynamic array. And the combo key is created in this dynamic array, where I'm saying, equals year and underscore and the update date. The combo key is created as a dynamic array because in dynamic array is far more fail proof. Somebody cannot go and just delete an in-between cell. You either have delete the entire array or you keep the full array. So people cannot easily play with it. So that is one of the things that we have done. And when you're using dynamic array, I would recommend working with names. So here in this case, if I look at it, I have named this cell as actual years. And this cell has been named as actual update dates, right? This is what I have done. The first cell, and that's what we have given here. And that's how it is flowing for us. When it comes to forecast, what I've done is just one small thing that just to make life a little easy, I've done is I've pulled out all the periods, but I've applied a filter function on this. By applying a filter function, what I've done is I've said, pull out all the dates only if the scenario equals the scenario that we have chosen here. So this one pulls up the update date and then we get the year, revenue, everything using the filter functions. We are applying filter for all the cases. And then the combo key is created in this dynamic array. That is one difference that we are bringing in so that, so we make the model more fail proof. Calculated columns are okay in the old versions, but they are not fail proof. So it's better to use dynamic array, right? The next is how do we make the time period dynamic? How do I make sure that, when 2028 is added, I get the model going all the way till 28. So as of 30th April, my forecast is only till 27. If we go to 2028, if I go to set the date as 30th June, 2028 flows in. How have I done it? I've used a few helper sections. Firstly, what is the latest reported here? Just like what we did in the earlier version, I've used a maxifs to get that data. I've also applied a maxifs function to find out what is the last updated forecast here given my status date. So pull out the forecast here from this dynamic array, right? Where the update date is less than or equal to the status date we have. And one more thing is the scenario should be, because I may not update all the scenarios in all the dates. And the scenario should be whatever scenario we are choosing here. Pull out the max data. So that tells me that, I need Forecast numbers should flow from 25 to 28. So that's 4 years of forecast I need. And I'm using a sequence function here where I'm putting a sequence function saying that, start with sequence of 4 years. How did I get that 4? Because 28 is my last year I want. And 28 minus 24, that's the 4 years period. So 1 row, 4 columns. I'm sorry, I've already got the number of years. 1 row, 4 columns starting in 25. So if our status date is May, this is not going to pick up the 28 number because in January we didn't have 28 forecasts and we didn't even have 24 actuals. It only picks up that data. How did I do the rest of the thing? Mostly the rest of the things are same, but in dynamic array when you're using, it's better to do the actual separately, forecast separately, and then stitch them together separately. Because when I was doing in Office 19, for my forecasted sales, I could select previous year into 1 plus growth rate and copy paste it. In dynamic array, you cannot do previous year into 1 plus growth rate, right? Because it is going to come as one single array. For 2026, you want 25 sales, and 27, you need 26 sales, but they are all going to come as one single array. So we need a scan function. I need a scan function that will take the last reported revenue and will grow at these rates. So I've used the scan function to get this information. It's not an easy task to combine actuals with forecast there because actuals get overwritten. So what we have done here is, once you know that, what is my latest actuals period, you get that data. So rather than using an if function, I know here the data will only be my historical data. So XLOOKUP into the historical data. And for forecast, I know that this section is entirely forecast, so I don't have to check whether this data is flowing from historical. That if history is not something I'm checking, I'm directly using the XLOOKUP function to pull out the assumptions. I'm pulling out the last reported actuals because for revenue, I do need the last reported actuals for me to apply the growth rate. So since we know that the last reported actuals using MaxF we found out is 23, for the 23, I'm pulling out the last reported actuals and I'm applying growth rate on that. The core concept remains the same. Only difference here that we are bringing in is using the scan function, because if you want to apply year over year growth rate, normally you would say 380, and then you will take the previous year number into 1 plus growth rate and copy. In a dynamic array, this entire calculation is going to come as a single cell, right? Where you cannot say previous year, because how do I say previous year? Because the formula is all in a single cell. In 25, I'm not going to type anything in the next column. So you will have to use a scan function for this. So the way to do scan function is scan starting value, which is my last reported revenue, comma. I have to multiply everything with 1 plus the growth rate. So I'm going to put 1 plus these growth rates. Then finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I need product of this. And I'll close the bracket. Product in the sense you need to multiply these two and create this function. We've got the answer. If those of you are not sure what a scan function is, how it does, we do have a YouTube video. So post this session, we will also share the links to those relevant YouTube videos in our LinkedIn comments, and we'll also probably put it here, and you can also go through that. I'll pause for a moment before moving on. Any questions, any thoughts, anything that's come here? Desigan, Aditya, any chats, LinkedIn?
No, sir.
Okay. So what we'll do next is, let's talk about one big issue here. Firstly, this is not a very convenient way to capture the input, right? You're going to look at an input table that looks like this. Typing input here is not an easy case for a lot of us. The next problem is, how do we ensure that we are all victims of habits? How do I ensure that next time I'm going to update something, I don't by mistake overwrite it? How do I ensure that? That is another problem. One more problem is timestamp. This timestamp here is manual. If you're like me, you're stuck in 2015, I still type 2015 for 2025, right? I might put a wrong timestamp. And in a matter of couple of months, many of us are going to start facing the same issue. In January 26, a lot of us would end up typing January 25, right? This is another problem that we all are going to have. So how do we handle this particular issue here, right? Um, this is where what we're going to do is we are going to bring in PowerApps. So all my inputs now are not going to be stored in this sheet at all. They are going to be stored in SharePoint, and I'm going to be pulling this from SharePoint, and there it will go through an approval process. So, I'll ask Aditya to share his screen where he'll show, if you look at it, right now I've obtained all this input from a SharePoint site. These inputs are flowing from there. And you can see here the last update I have is for 2028. Last update was on 22nd August 2025. This is where it was updated. So let me show you now what's going to happen. I'll stop the screen. Aditya, if you could share yours.
Yes. Just give me a second.
Sure.
Yeah. Is my screen visible?
It is loading. Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. So here is my
What we have done
PowerApps.
here is that we have added a PowerApps, right? And this is a PowerApps where you open and you see all your assumptions coming from SharePoint. Sorry, Thea, take it forward from here.
Yeah. So even the benefit of this is that you can filter and play with it as well. Anyways, let me show you. Yeah. Something is, yeah. So you can see here, you can play with the app as well, and it gives much more user-friendly nature. But let me show you how we can add those assumptions. Yeah. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add 2027. Then revenue growth, that is, let's say I want to add now 9%. Then for gross margin, let me add 36%. Then for OPEX, let me add 10%. Yeah. By default, it will take bases as well, base case scenario, but we can switch to best as well. For the time being, let me go with best scenario. I can add another row here. Yeah. Then let me add 2028. Let me quickly add more data here. And let me add. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. You can just put any number.
Yeah. And once I click the send button, what will happen is it will trigger an workflow, and Sir will now show you how he can approve it. And once you will add those data, right, then only once the approval will be confirmed, then and only then the data will be updated. Yes, sir.
So now
Let
let
me
me
show.
share my screen and I'll show you what is happening. And keep in mind, if you have access to Microsoft 365, you do have access to Power Apps and Power Automate. Canvas version, right? Power Apps, Canvas apps are available for all of us. Of course, your IT team has to give you access in your company, but it's free. There is no extra cost if you have Microsoft 365. And let me just show you what's happening. Let me share my screen first. Just one moment. So what is going to happen now is we will have this approval that Aditya just updated has come to me here, right? If I don't like this, if I think, okay, his numbers are not something that what we agreed upon and I would like to reject it, I can click reject. And once, if I'm going to approve it, what I'm going to do is I'll click on approve. This, once I approve, this is going to update my SharePoint table. So we can create a SharePoint list. Let me just quickly go into that and very quickly show you in terms of, what is this list here. Now, SharePoint list can be better controlled. You can have access controls there, who can see what and other things. Just one moment. Okay, I think we have hidden the site content because we don't want, at the end of the day, the list needs to be secured. So it's not available for everybody to see. So that's one thing. It's getting updated in the SharePoint end, but not everybody can see it because we have kind of not giving it access to everybody. Only those who can access the site contents would be able to see. And even if somebody changes the SharePoint list, you can create certain automatic triggers which will alert people that somebody is messing up with the SharePoint list. So once we added it, you can see here this SharePoint list now contains the latest set of assumption. Now going back to the Excel file that we had, what I'm going to do now is I'll just refresh this data. And once I click on refresh, this is going to pull information from SharePoint, right? The query is still running and this is going to pull it up. One thing with when you're using Power Query based tables is that you can play around with the table. So you can see here that, we've got the latest number. You can play around with the table because one of the things that somebody may ask is, before I even go for update, how do I approve my SharePoint table, right? I mean, how do I approve it unless I see the output? And if I need to see the output, the input needs to be here. And if the input needs to be here, I need to approve it. So we have our own circularity in the workflow here. To approve, I need to see the output. To see the output, I need the input. And to get the input, I need to have an approval. One good thing is when you're pulling data with Power Query, you can play around with the inputs right here. Nobody stops you. Only thing is it'll automatically change later on. Let's say I'm adding a 2029 number here and I'm putting, let's say this is as on date today, 3010. This was not approved earlier, but somebody is manually adding it 10%, 40% and 6%, whatever. If somebody is manually changing this here, they can change it. Models will pick it up. But all that we need to ensure that it reverts back, all the unapproved one goes off is while we add the 2029 here, just go and refresh it again. Excel will get rid of this 2029 what we manually added, right? So for staging reasons, you want to see how the data looks like, add the assumptions in this table, see it. Once you're happy, send it through the proper approval process and refresh the table here. This is what we can do. And again, one of the things I would like to clearly highlight here is that we can, it's not about PowerApps and SharePoint, right? It's not about Excel. I could have demonstrated the same using Zoho Sheets to you as well, right? So we need an app, a front-end app. That could be a Power App that you could create it with Zoho Creator as well. Or it could be a Google Forms for all you know, right? You could create a Google Forms with a more interactive front end and link it to an approval workflow and save the data not in your Excel but in a more secure server. That could be an Access database. It could be if it's cloud, better would be to use I like to use SharePoint list. Keep it there and then we can pull it from there and then we can do the rest of the work as we did, right? Since we are already overshot, what I'll do is I will stop the, because I'm sure a lot of you will also have other things to do today, it being a working day. We try to keep it very short, but it's already, we overshot by 20 minutes. We've almost covered most of the things. I will share the file with you where what I also wanted to show is you can even use this to handle more complicated scenarios. I can share this file with you. You can go through it. What I have done here is that, often I create models where this is the situation I have. I'm picking up, let's say, interest rate or LIBOR or anything. And my table is right now from 1st January. So when somebody says 1st January 2%, that means January till March, I want it to be 2%. And March till June, I want it to be 4. And June onwards, it needs to be, sorry, March till June, it's 3. And June onwards, it needs to be 4. How I would do this in a typical financial model is using an XLOOKUP. I'll say XLOOKUP for these periods, for this effective date and inflation rate, and pull out the closest with an approximate match. So this, even for February, even though February is not listed here, I'm pulling the data. But in this case, what could happen is, let's say somewhere later on, I think, okay, you know what, from March to June, I thought it'll be 3. But April onwards, it'll change to 3.5. And that is something I believe will happen. And that's a thought that comes to me, let's say on 18th November 2025. Even these situations, because here I have 2 approximate matches. One is an approximate match for the effective date. Another one is approximate for the update date. Two approximate matches have to be handled, but even that can be handled here. That's what I have illustrated in this particular illustration. So what I would recommend is that, you could perhaps take this time and go through this particular file. We this file with all of you, the participants, in through a LinkedIn link, a live link. I mean, in that LinkedIn event page, and you can go through this. All right. So I will end this. I will just before we end, maybe we could have a small, feedback. I would like you to share your feedback. Desik and Aditya, if you could also share the feedback link with the participants in LinkedIn and WebEx. And in the meanwhile, please feel free to ask your questions as any question that comes your way.
So
Yeah.
there is one comment on LinkedIn. How will multi-currency and multi-region be captured in such modeling?
It can be captured, right? In fact, this illustration I brought in was for scenario like this. Only thing is it will need a little bit more engineering, right? We will just need a lot more engineering that we need to bring in here. Here is right, but it can be done with the same framework. You just need to extend it, where we will also have to put a, if you're using a combo key, for example, right now we used a combo key in this particular case for what to say, a year and date. What you could also do is you could, if you have one more region in a combo key, also stitch the region into picture. Or when you're using maxifs, add one more criteria where you could say, where the region is APAC, region is EMEA. So in your maxifs as well, those kind of changes can be brought in. Any other? I got one here on Lambda. We didn't cover Lambda function today because one of the things we wanted to show you is that you could do all these things without Lambda, right? We didn't need a Lambda at all for doing this. The only Lambda function of sort probably I used was the scan function, where Lambda can come into picture. I mean, for those of you who are staying back, I'll just very briefly give you one more part we had in our agenda today, where Lambda can make our life easy is, what if, let's say, because when I took you through the slides, I told you, parameters change, we create a separate assumption. But sometimes models also change. If models change, is it possible for me to not have, let's say, different file? In a same file, is there a way for me to figure out what was my pickup? I mean, is it possible for me to store all the past formulas? It's possible. It's much higher level of engineering that we'll have to use. I will try to do it very quickly here, right? And then I will show you what we are talking about. So what I'm going to do is, and here is where I'm going to bring in a Lambda. So Lambda is something that we use to create custom functions. Again, I'm not going to teach you how to create a Lambda because we don't have time for it. But what I'm going to do is, let's say I'm going to create two Lambdas here. One Lambda is going to be, firstly, let me talk about what is the situation I'm talking about. So what I want is the OPEX growth rate that you're seeing here in the forecast. Right now, we're taking it as revenue multiplied by OPEX rate. There's revenue and I'm multiplying it by OPEX rate. I want a situation where it can either be revenue into the rate or it can be average of the past data. So what I want is, I want the average of the past data to be taken, right? And I want to repeat it. In this case, if it's 4 years, I want to repeat it 4 years. So I'm going to do a Lambda function here where I'm going to type a Lambda where I'm going to say, Lambda range n rows, n columns. People are going to give you these parameters, right? They're going to give you some range. They're going to give you how many rows of data they want, how many columns of data they want. Give as an output. The last item is the output. In Lambda, whatever you mentioned as the last item is the output. So the output I want is whatever range they are giving, take an average of it and spread it over as many rows and as many columns that they asked for. The starting value will be, sorry, my mistake here. sequence of n rows and n columns, whatever number of rows they want, give them as many rows and as many columns. And the value you have to give is the average of the range, and don't increment it. 0 here stands for let the average be as it is, because sequence by default will increment the value by 1. So this is a custom lambda I have created, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this lambda. I'm going to give it a name, right? I'll call it as a repeat average. So I'll copy this lambda. To store it, what I'll do is I'll go to formulas, name manager, click new. And in this section, I'm going to put the name as, let's say, repeat average, something like this. Repeat average. And it refers to, and here is where I'm going to paste the lambda function that we had created. Click OK. All right. So if somebody tells me that, you need to repeat the average. Sorry, repeat average, and you give me a range of values. Let's say in this case, OPEX. That's going to, I have to tell how many times. So 1 time and 4 values. Let's say if I'm going to set my n forecast years. That's going to come here. 4 times I'm going to get the average. Now let's see how I use this lambda along with a macro 4.0 to make formula as a variable, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more table here. Let me for now just put it here, the table effective date and formula. Will I do it in real life? Not yet. I'm giving this to you as a framework that this is a possibility. I will not do it as on date, right? Let me put the effective date as, let's say, 15th September 2025. The formula I wanted to apply on that date was for OPEX was this. Estimated revenue multiplied by applied OPEX rate. This is the formula I wanted. I'm going to store this formula as a text here. And let's say today being 30th October, I changed my mind. 30th October 2025, I changed my mind where I'm going to say now the formula needs to be repeat average of these OPEX data, 1 column and 4 values. Okay, and this again, I'm going to store it as a date. When you use lambda, this additional capability comes into picture, right? So what I'll do is if a user is taking the update data as anything like, let's say I had this from 15th September, let's say 15th September 24. I changed my mind only on, let's say 30th September 25. So if the user puts 31st January 25. So until October 25, I want my model to pick up this formula. After October 30th, October 25, I want my model to pick up this formula and apply it here. You can think of using an if function, but again, we would not suggest a if function because I want this to be dynamic. Maybe 3 months down the line, you may choose a completely different formula for OPEX. You may say last year into 1 plus growth rate. We don't want to keep using an if function for storing everything. So we're going to store it just as a variable. What I'll do is based on, let's say the applied formula, I'm going to do a XLOOKUP to pull out this XLOOKUP for this update date. This is the effective date and this is the formula. Pull this out and approximate match because 31st January is not there. If it's not there, you need to pick up data for 15th September. This is what I've typed here. And what I'm going to do is, we are now bringing in macro 4.0. So there are many reasons I will not use the solution in real life, but I'm giving you a framework and I'll also tell you the way forward. So I'll go to formulas, name manager. I'm going to create a formula here called say, new. And let's call it as OPEX function or OPEX forecast. This is the name I'm using, OPEX forecast. And I'm going to say what this should refer to is evaluate. So this evaluate function is a macro 4.0 function. It doesn't exist inside Excel. It exists as macro 4.0. You will have to save your file as a macro enabled file. So evaluate this particular cell, L33. Click OK. So OPEX forecast, what it's going to do is it's going to evaluate this text that we have written here, and whatever comes out, it's going to that's good to us. Right? It'll convert the text into a formula, and that's how it's going to work for us. So let's see what we're going to do. So in my OPEX, I'm not even going to do this estimated revenue. I'm going to say, no, this is going to be equal to OPEX forecast. Right. So right now it's 31st January. Our OPEX forecast was based on revenue multiplied by historical data, right? Revenue multiplied by this 8%. That's the number that we are supposed to get. So 490, whatever is our revenue multiplied by this. Let me change the update date to, let's say, 30th November 25. There is a small bug in my Excel as such. It's not in the formula. It's in the Excel. Excel needs update. So I had to press, once more. Things went to 0. I had to refresh the calculation once. But now what happens is you can very clearly see it's just picking up the average of the past. It's not using revenue into one. So you can convert even models. So even for different models, you don't theoretically need a different file. You can save models as a variable or formula as a variable, and you can pick up for which date, which formula I want. But why I will not use it as on date in real life is two reasons. One is its evaluate function is macro 4.0. Very old feature, this macro 4.0 was. I would not be surprised if Microsoft removes this feature in the upcoming days. That's one very big problem. Second is, this one has a lot of side effects. For example, we did not say which time period. I mean, when did I save the year? Earlier, when we used XLOOKUP, we said, we wanted for a particular year. The year data flowed into our calculation. Here, I didn't say which year. Those data points are indirectly built or implicitly built into the formula, which makes it a little very difficult to debug, and also make it a little risky to use in our file. By mistake, if I use an OPEX forecast in this line, you will see the same OPEX forecast coming here, right? This is not for any year. It's just wrongly placed, and I'm still getting some answer. These are some of the issues why I'll not use. But what I visualize that Microsoft may do in future is Microsoft may introduce data types, a function as a data type. So today, for example, you have stock as a data type, right? So you could go to data and choose something as a stock share, and Excel is going to, then you have it behaves slightly differently. If I'm going to say, okay, the stock is a data type, I can obtain its beta and everything from this cell. So same way, it is possible that sometime in future, the cell becomes a data type. And then in the scan function, just like, I used one of the built-in function of Excel as product. Instead of typing product here, I must be able to link it to a cell which reads that formula, and then Excel picks it up from there. That may happen. I'm just speculating. It's looking at the way Excel is evolving. It may go there. To the best of my knowledge, these kind of features are already available in Power Query and maybe Power BI as well. Python, it definitely exists, right? These kind of feature exists where variable or formula can be a variable. Formula can be modified based on categories, right? So yeah, that's just to give you an idea in terms of how you can extend this capability further. I already showed you how you could have done it in 2019 when we didn't have dynamic arrays, when we didn't have any of the lambdas or anything, how we could have done it with just intelligent architecture. PowerApps existed probably then itself, or it exists today. Even if you don't want dynamic array and lambda, we can do it. With dynamic array, I showed you how we can automatically extend the period. And when you bring in lambda, and lambda with macro 4.0, we saw how you can even make formulas dynamic, right? I mean, formulas as a variable. Yeah, so I think we have far exceeded the slot. Thank you all for joining. But yeah, if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer those questions. Any questions here?
So Ganesh was asking, are there any resources to learn dynamic arrays and lambdas?
I would strongly recommend, Ganesh, two things. You can follow our channel. We've already got ample amount of videos on dynamic arrays and lambdas. And we will also be coming up with a, last year we were supposed to come up with a program. We'll also be coming up with a full program on how to use dynamic arrays for financial modeling, which is our black belt curriculum, which we keep pushing for future, mainly because people are scared of dynamic arrays. But we'll probably be launching that as well. And I would also suggest, follow our website, which is the bestmodeling.org. As of now, there are very few illustrations, but we are making a lot of illustrations there, which will also tell you what is the best practice for building dynamic array based models, because dynamic array is a new feature in Excel, relatively speaking, and different people use it differently. We've been building dynamic array based model for 5 years. We've made all the mistakes that you may think of making. We have learned it from our mistakes. That's how we made that guide. What's the right thing to do? Right? We have done, most of our client work is only dynamic array based. We don't do anything other than dynamic array based work to our clients, right? When it comes to Excel. So that's something that I would recommend. Follow this bestmodeling.org. I'll also put it in the chat section. Aditya, if you could put that in the chat, that'll be great. The bestmodeling.org.
Yes, sir.
That's
I
something
provided.
that we do. Great. Any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, sir. Any future plans for such webinars or something like that?
We will.
We
will
have
be
already
coming up with
included.
in fact, the next webinar will be on the second part of this, right? Which is about how do you securely save your past versions, because models change, right? Formulas change. People do change the formula, which I illustrated how we can handle it within the same file, right? But having said that, it may not be always the ideal thing to do. Sometimes you will want to save it as a separate version. But if you save it as a separate version, how do you securely save it? How people ensure that people cannot make unauthorized change, and how you can still pull it into your Power BI or use Power Query and pull it into your Excel, analyze. That's a webinar that we'll be doing probably in another couple of weeks' time. We will reach out to all of you who are here, and we'll update you when we do that webinar. And make sure you follow Profectus Academy website. Again, Aditya, if you could put that link also in both LinkedIn and this thing. I'm not accessing chat because I'm just trying to look at other things. So it would be great if you could do it. Follow us on the Profectus Academy page in LinkedIn as well, because we will be advertising everything there. And even my profile, maybe, when I share it, if you want it, there's a bell icon in LinkedIn as well, apparently. So check it out, so that you stay updated about all the upcoming webinars. And we are going to be doing a lot more in the next coming days, right? Any other questions, thoughts? Okay. If there are nothing else,
Yes, I
we'll
just
wind
wanted to
up
say,
here. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, it was like really
Share
amazing
laptop.
webinar. Like really enjoyed, same things, like very basic things, how to structure the data. And I can see a lot of work being done by Profectus on this. Like personally, I've learned a lot of lambdas from Profectus Academy channel. So it was like very insightful and very interesting webinar, especially coming from a financial modeling background of, traditional things. So looking forward to your next webinar, and thank you so much for hosting this.
Thank you, Sharma. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. And thanks. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.